We are into our second week of walking through the book of Ruth. Last week we covered the first chapter, and just to give you a recap, in the first chapter of Ruth, we have Naomi, who's married to Elimelech. You don't meet many Elimelechs these days. Naomi's married to Elimelech. Naomi and Elimelech have two sons, and there's a famine in Bethlehem where they are from. And so they leave Bethlehem, they go to the foreign place of Moab. And shortly after they move there, Naomi's husband Elimelech dies. Well, the story doesn't end. Naomi's two sons meet and marry two Moabite women, and after 10 more years, then Naomi's two sons die. So Naomi is left in a foreign land with two daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. Naomi decides to go back home when she hears that the famine is over, but she tells her daughters-in-law to go back to their parents' house because she doesn't have anything more for them. Eventually, Orpah does turn and go home. Ruth clings to her mother-in-law's side and says, "Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God." And so Ruth shows great love and faithfulness in staying with Naomi. But as we reach the end of chapter 1, Naomi says, "Don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara, because I am bitter with tears. And God sent me away full and has brought me back empty. I have no hope." But the very last line of chapter 1 says they were coming back to Bethlehem and the barley harvest was about to happen. And so we jump in to the second chapter of Ruth. Now Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain, behind someone in whose sight I may find favor." She said to her, "Go, my daughter." So Ruth went. Ruth came and she gleaned in the field behind the reapers. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Just then Boaz came from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." They answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, "To whom does this young woman belong?" The servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the Moabite who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers." So she came, and she has been on her feet from early this morning until now, without resting even for a moment. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter, do not go glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn." Then she fell, prostrate with her face to the ground, and she said to him, "Why have I found favor in your sight, that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and your mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Then she said, "May I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I am not one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some of this bread and dip your morsel in the sour wine." So Ruth sat beside the reapers, and he heaped up for her some parched grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, "Let her glean even among the standing sheaves, and do not reproach her. You must also pull out some handfuls for her from the bundles and leave them for her to glean, and do not rebuke her." So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. You measure in ephahs, right? Right. Ruth picked it up, and she came into the town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gleaned. Then she took out and gave her what was left over, and she herself had been satisfied. Her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the one who took notice of you." So she took her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, "The name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "The man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin." Then Ruth the Moabite said, "He even said to me, 'Stay close by my servants until they have finished all my harvest.'" Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is better, my daughter, that you go out with his young women. Otherwise you might be bothered in another field." So Ruth stayed close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law. The word of the Lord. Glory to you, Lord. Grace, peace, and mercy be with you this day. I have a question for you as we begin. As we read the entire second chapter of Ruth, as you think back on it, what jumps out at you as an act of generosity or a sharing of abundance? What from that second chapter, those 23 verses, what still sticks in your mind of great generosity? Boaz's generosity, absolutely. Yeah. Multiple times, right? So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. So it says that Ruth went out to the fields. It was harvest time. Ruth went out to the fields to glean. We don't talk much about gleaning these days in the way that it is here in the Old Testament. In this time, there were laws or rules, Deuteronomical from the book of Deuteronomy, laws that said you should leave the edges, the corners of your fields, don't harvest from them. Leave those for the poor and the hungry and the needy. And how were fields harvested in this time? By hand. Yeah. There were no combines out there to efficiently and quickly, no GPS so that the farmers can be listening to the ball game and just going. This was done by hand. This was a lot of work. Not that farming isn't a lot of work today. But they were not as efficient as combines are today. And so grain would fall. There would be, what was meant to be harvested would fall to the ground or wouldn't get harvested. And so needy folks could go into the fields and glean in the fields, pick up what had been left behind. And this was seen as sharing out of abundance. This was part of the idea of tithing, of giving of what we have been given. And so Ruth goes to this field to glean. And she is collecting, and do you remember what it said, how long she had been there? From the beginning of the day until it was late, and not even taking a rest. She is working hard because as she and Naomi have come back to Bethlehem, they don't have anything. They don't have much more than just the relationship between the two of them. And so Ruth is out in the fields working hard, and she is noticed. Boaz, who is Naomi's relation by marriage, asks, "Who is this young woman?" And she's told, "This is Ruth, who came back from the country of Moab with Naomi." And Boaz has heard of Ruth. And so the instructions that he gives to Ruth and to his workers astounds me every time I read it. Listen to this. "Listen, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to the young women of my house. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you." You think someone from a foreign country coming to a strange place with people she does not know, how much protection would a young woman have? None. She is about as vulnerable a person as you can imagine. And Boaz is offering his protection. Come, glean in this field. Don't go anywhere else. You will be protected here. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. If you're thirsty, you don't need to go to the well and draw water. Let the ones who work for me do that for you. And then the instructions that he gives his workers regarding Ruth: leave some of the sheaves standing and pull some of them out and leave them for her. This is above and beyond. This is generosity to the nth degree. And why does Boaz treat Ruth so kindly? Because he knows what she's done for Naomi. Out of Ruth's abundance, she blessed Naomi. Out of Boaz's abundance, he blesses Ruth. And then the astonishing acts keep coming. He invites her to come and sit at the table along with his family, gives her enough to eat that she's satisfied and has leftovers. And then that funny word, that ephah, she goes back to Naomi with an ephah of grain. Like I said, we use ephahs all the time, right? It's about a bushel full. So this is a lot. She comes home with a lot. And now it's Naomi's turn to be astonished and amazed. Whose field were you in? Who took favor on you? And she tells the story of Boaz. And there's a blessing that Naomi speaks over Boaz's name. Blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. Blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. The turning around and smiling at the one behind you. Now, we're going to get more of the story of Ruth and Boaz as we go forward. But let's just pause here for a moment. This astonishing generosity to one who is not from Bethlehem, one who is not from this place, and yet is treated as family. Who here, just by a sign of hands, who here has ever been treated like a member of the family when you were not? It's amazing, isn't it? It can be overwhelming. When you are welcomed as one who has always belonged, offered hospitality and protection. Growing up, my family, we always had a last-minute dinner guest. There was always an extra place or two set at the table because my dad loved to invite folks who had nowhere to go to come and be. It caused my mom a little bit of stress. But there was always an open place. And I remember as I got older, I decided I wanted to be someone like that. To share of the abundance of love that had been showered on me, to share with others. I've got a picture up here. What is that little boy doing? Skipping stones, throwing stones into the water. And several weeks ago, a poem was shared with me called Small Boy by Norman McCaig. And I'd like to share it with you as we think about generosity and abundance. Small boy. He picked up a pebble and threw it into the sea, and another and another. He couldn't stop. He wasn't trying to fill the sea. He wasn't trying to empty the beach. He was just throwing away nothing else but. Like a kitten playing, he was practicing for the future, when there'll be so many things he'll want to throw away, if only his fingers will unclench and let them go. It gets harder the older we get to unclench and let go. What are some of the things that prevent us from sharing from our abundance? What prevents us from being generous in the way that we're called to be? What are some things?
Well, we don't know how long we're going to live, so we always want to have enough.
Yeah.
For our days.
Yeah, we got to prepare for tomorrow, right? If we give away today, we might not have enough for tomorrow. Yeah, what else? Memories. Okay. Yeah, if I give you this, will I remember who gave it to me or how I got the shirt? Okay. One more. What prevents us from letting go? Selfish? Yeah, maybe. Yeah. How about fear? How about fear? Ruth, a foreigner, came and was not known but by a few, and yet she was blessed. 2 weeks ago, I was over visiting my nieces when there was a knock on the door, and it was a young person who looked to be in fairly rough shape. I wasn't sure exactly what was going on, and they said that their cell phone didn't have service, which seemed odd to me in the middle of town. And said, can I borrow your phone? I need to make a call. And I started to think, is this a scam? Are they going to try to run away with my phone? Are they going, what is going on? And I was hesitant because I was afraid. In fact, I asked the person, okay, what's the number? I'll punch it in. And then I handed the person the phone. And as this person was desperately pleading with someone on the other line for a ride to come pick them up because they didn't know where they were going to go next, my heart was thawed. My heart was convicted. Because here, I was looking at this person from a perspective of what are they going to take from me instead of what can I offer this person. Didn't hack my phone, didn't steal my phone, didn't drop or break my phone, and after all, it's just a phone. And as they were effusive in their thanks, I realized I had been afraid. And this was not how I am called to be as a follower of Christ. It took me unclenching a little bit, loosening my grip a little bit, to see what a blessing we are when we come forward with open hands. I don't know how you are going to be called to share of your abundance this week, whether it's with a smile, whether it's with a kind word, letting someone use your phone, giving someone a ride. I don't know what God has in store for you this week. But the more we practice unclenching, the more we practice letting go, the more we look to the saints that have gone before us, to Ruth and Boaz, to our parents, grandparents, or to our kids for how they're generous, then we walk in the path that we have been called to in the light of Christ. My prayer for each of us is that these words get spoken about us. Blessed be all those by the Lord whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. We are a people of a great abundance, blessed beyond measure. Let's go be a blessing. Amen.